So I extend their felicitations as well. Thank you for inviting us to this auspicious occasion, giving us the opportunity to have this dialogue and raise some very important issues from the communities across the region. As a civil society network from the South, we have been engaging with the bank since the 80s. The forum and community partners have been closely monitoring policies of the ADB and the evolution of its programs and projects for decades now. As ADB celebrates its 50 years of success, we hope that it will also recognize many of its failed projects over the past decades. Because as we are recognizing the success, there is also a track record of environmental and social displacement. I will give you a few examples. The Mar Copper mining project from the Philippines in the 80s. The Khulna Joshua Drainage Rehabilitation Project, Bangladesh from the 90s. The Namtham 2 hydropower project in Laos. These are all examples where many people's lives have been displaced and the environment has been irreparably damaged. And the suffering still continues even today. In recent times, we have seen that the ADB has increased its lending in the region, mostly in the energy and transport sectors. But this has also meant a decrease in support for important sectors like health and education. There is also a worrisome trend of investing, as Anne pointed out from PSI, on the private sector. The private sector lending has increased by 15% since last year. So our question is, in national law, it's very difficult to hold private sector accountable. In international law, it's even a struggle with the business on human rights dialogues which are ongoing. So how do multilateral development banks ensure private capital will be accountable? I think that's a question for all NDBs, including the ADB. We're also concerned that we have new financial institutions like the New Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. There is a competition for moving finances very quickly, and this may also result in the dilution of due diligence and a race to the bottom in safeguards and governance mechanisms within these banks. We urge that the ADB does not follow this path and retain its standards. In the event of ADB's 50th anniversary and under the ambit of your leadership, Mr. President, we expect the bank to uphold the values of dignity, justice, and honor by ensuring that the bank stays true to its mandate of poverty alleviation across Asia. We expect the ADB to support, as you mentioned, the Sustainable Development Goal targets of each government, and we hope that the ADB continues and supports the NDCs to meet the COP21 Paris agreements. So I'll go straight more specifically to a few questions. We hope there is enough time for you to answer. The first question, can you ensure that the safeguards policy of 2010 will not be diluted and can only be amended with additional add-ons, as you mentioned, core labor standards, and there are many other issues? Number two, how does ADB intend to remedy the harm and injustice done by projects prior to the approval of ADB safeguard standards and even before the accountability mechanism was set up? That is why I mentioned the older projects. And we have an affected committee here from the Mar Copper mining project who will ask you questions about remedy on the ground now. How does ADB intend to decarbonize Asia, recognizing the limited carbon budget available in the region? India and China are dominating most of the carbon budget, and sooner or later the space for absorbing carbon will run out. So that is a key area where ADB needs to look at. Consequently, as I mentioned earlier, the NDCs need to be supported. Number four, and this is a very sensitive area, will ADB withdraw lending of autocratic regimes which oppress human rights and the rights of indigenous peoples and marginalized groups? And number five, despite the ADB's safeguards and the accountability mechanism, we have experienced that the ADB's immunity is an obstacle to achieve meaningful remedy for affected communities. Do you think after 50 years, it's time to reconsider ADB's immunity? And as you mentioned, PPPs, the private capital and the private sector is actually piggybacking on ADB's immunity as well. So that is something which you also need to think about. Because if we're really talking about true justice and accountability, And as you mentioned, the old ways have to change in order for new ideas to come in. Maybe ADB can be a leader and showcase us that it is open to constructive criticism and be challenged for all its actions in Asia. I would like to stop there with the questions and I introduce you to Ms. Adeline Angeles. She's an effective committee representative from Marinduque Markup or Mining Project Philippines. She will share a few words with you. And she is carrying two gifts for the 50th anniversary from the India Forum. A photo book which archives 50 years of 50 disaster-related projects collected from the various forum members across. And the second, a trend analysis of ADB's 50 years of lending from our perspective. I hope it adds insight to the Strategy 2030 process as well.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm Adeline Angeles. I'm from the province of Marinduque in the Philippines. My province hosted Marinduque Mining Corporation for more than 30 years, for around 30 years. Their initial fund came from a $40 million loan from ADB. And however, in 1996, the company was forced to stop because of the mine spill. And now they left Marinduque after around 30 years with two major rivers heavily silted with toxic waste, municipal seawaters also contaminated. The result of the studies by the Department of Health showed that 100% of those tested were suffering from heavy metal contamination. And now, as I am speaking here, I am very worried because based on they left dangerous dumps, which according to the studies made by USGS, for instance, among other studies, are now posing imminent danger to my community. And I am now speaking here not only on behalf of my province, but also on behalf of the many affected communities by similar projects. Thus, we hope that ADB, when ADB funded that project, we are very hopeful that they will be able to maintain a certain standard. But now, in 1998, after the incident, they divested, and ADB and Placerdome, which was 40% owner of that company, was able to transfer their interest to MR Holdings based in Cayman Island, leaving all those impacts behind. So we hope that ADB could also do something on projects like this, which are affecting greatly many communities. Thank you.